This is Franchise Today, brought to you by FRM Solutions, providers of the best-in-class software solutions for franchise relationship management. Franchise Today is your destination for weekly information, conversations, and interviews with accomplished industry leaders, all of whom share best practices for sustainable growth and sensible franchising. Here now, your host, Stan Friedman, to kick off this week's podcast.
Today is Wednesday, October 23rd, 2024. I'm Stan Friedman, and this is Franchise Today. Well, the 25th annual FLDC is in the rearview mirror, and as always, what a stellar event it was. My congratulations to Gary Gardner, Therese Tilgen, Diane Phibbs, and the entire Franchise Update media team, as well as to Matt Heller and the team at the IFA for presenting this incredible event. My thanks and appreciation, too, go to Joe Seavey, Chief Development Officer at Papa John's, who is this year's conference chair. Joe curated an incredible roster of heavyweight educators, speakers, and moderators to this well-crafted event, which over-delivered on its mission to celebrate 25 years of community and collaboration. Hats off again to one and all. This week, my guest is serial entrepreneur Ron Holt, founder of Two Maids and a Mop, from which he successfully exited after 18 years. At nearly 100 units. Not one to sit on his hands, that same year, Ron began building a second empire as founder, CEO, and now franchisor of Pink Zebra Moving. And as you'll hear today, he is already making waves and seriously disrupting the moving industry. A quick time out, and when I return, I'll introduce you to Ron Holt. Stay right there.
Franchise Today will be right back, but first, a word from our sponsors.
We are all familiar with Vistage, YPO, and EO. Well, now comes Zor Forum, a somewhat similar type of executive group, but this one comes with a twist. Zor Forum groups are exclusively for franchisors. Imagine a peer group for sharing and networking on a platform built exclusively for franchise executives. Zor Forum members are afforded unparalleled access to best practices and some of the brightest minds within the franchising world through regular meetings and a dedicated communications platform. In this post-COVID world, a franchise-specific mastermind or peer group is an endeavor worth making time for. Zor Forum groups of 6 to 10 will bring leaders together that are in similar situations, but with exclusivity in terms of their competitive set, so that each can openly help others benefit from their respective knowledge, perspective, and experience with no fear of competitive loss. Network, learn, strategize, and remain motivated along your journey. Join a peer group, not just any peer group. Join the only one designed for emerging franchisors. Join Zor Forum. Learn more at zorforum.com. That's www.zorforum.com. Ron Holt's LinkedIn profile boasts a long list of trophies and credits. After spending nearly 2 decades scaling Two Maids and a Mop from a single location into nearly 100 locations before successfully selling to private equity, he began the second chapter of his entrepreneurial career, scaling Pink Zebra Moving from a single location into a disruptive national brand. Ron's story is inspiring, and he's here today to share it with us. Ron Holt, welcome to Franchise Today.
Thank you. I'm proud and honored to be here, Stan. I can't wait to tell my story.
And it's great having you here, Ron. Appreciate taking out the time to spend some time with us. And let me thank you, as you've told me in the green room, that you've been a loyal listener to Franchise Today. So nothing more fun for me than having the opportunity to interview somebody who already listens to the podcast. So thank you for that.
I love your podcast. Like you said, I've listened to several episodes. I'm a nerd of all franchising. So when I found your podcast, I nerded out. So I'm glad to be here, and hopefully I can impart some knowledge and wisdom as well.
Well, we'll unpack the story of your story, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of nuggets that will come out along the way. So why don't we start as we always do, Ron? We know that franchising is not an intentional way of doing business. We don't find it, it finds us. So in 1997, you graduate from the University of Georgia with a BS in biological sciences. How does that lead you into the franchising business with Two Maids and a Mop?
Well, at that time, I was as far from franchising as I could possibly be. Like you said, a lot of people are that way at some point before franchising finds them, but that's what I thought you did. You know, I thought you went out, you joined the rat race of corporate America, and you worked your way up the totem pole, and you made money along the way, and then you retired and bought boats. I just thought that's what you did. And then, it hit me one day that maybe there was a different way. And that small acknowledgement of that there might be a different way of running my life eventually led me to this exciting and beautiful world of franchising.
So tell us how that looked. What was that all about? What did you do?
Well, to kind of go back to that seminal moment, Atlanta as well as I do. Unfortunately, traffic stinks, right? And so I was on the interstate, I-85, coming down from Gwinnett, going to my work. I was working in a lab using that biology degree at the time. And, we were just kind of stuck on the interstate. So I looked to my left and I looked to my right, and I saw people that looked like older versions of me, and they looked very sad, not because they were stuck in traffic. It looked like they were very just sort of stuck in their own lives and almost like zombie going to whatever they needed to go to next to keep going. But I said, why does my life have to be that way? And how can I make my life different? And so that was in the early morning. I went to work, did my thing. And during the lunch period, I went to the local mall. Back then, it was 20 plus years ago. Back then, malls had bookstores. And so I went to the bookstore and I said, I'm going to find a book that I can read to teach me how to not be that zombie, that corporate America zombie. And I was very fortunate to pick up the right book. And it was called The E-Myth. And so it taught me a lot about the life of a business owner, small business owner. That's all I thought it really meant at the time. As I grew as an entrepreneur, I learned it was an actual Bible per se to this world we're in now, franchising. But that discovery kind of led me down this entrepreneurial path that I didn't know I had inside of me. I just thought I was going to be another corporate person, And so I made a decision that day, that night, that I was going to start a business. I was in my early 20s. I didn't know what that business was going to be. I didn't know what industry it was going to be in, and I didn't have any money to do it anyway. So it was a lot of work between that discovery moment to actually making that business come to life. That's how it all got started.
So what was the first thing you did after you read that book? How did the light bulbs blink? And I'm real connected to the E-Myth and Michael E. Gerber as well. So I've heard many a successful story, all the way to Omar Solomon and Nick Friedman, last year's Entrepreneurs of the Year at IFA with College Hunks Hauling Junk. It all started for them with the E-Myth too. So let's hear what light bulbs went off and what actions did you take?
Well, the first thing it did wasn't as textbook as it would later turn out to be. It was more inspirational. It taught me that there is a way for someone with an idea to actually build a business around that idea. And so I was already inside this laboratory world. I was performing what I thought was really technical scientific work. But at the end of the day, it was a service, just like cleaning services or moving services. And so once I understood the business side of that lab that I was working inside of, I started really sort of almost obsessing over what the economics of that business model looked like. And so what I learned very quickly was that even though this was a lab, that the power of recurring revenue was pretty strong. And so when I had that discovery, I said to myself, well, what business am I going to start after I get out of this lab world? Because again, I didn't know what business or industry I was going to be in. Well, that sort of discovery again led me down this path of eventually finding the world of house cleaning of all things. I saw a very close parable to house cleaning to laboratory services of all. And I know it sounds crazy, but they seemed very similar to me. But the difference was obviously in the lab world, there was a high capital cost to enter the industry, intellectual cost on top of that. And there was a lot of big power brokers in that marketplace. And so it was going to be very difficult for me to just be the next best lab service guy. But in the cleaning world at the time, very few people existed. Of course, Mary Maids was there and Molly Maid was there, but the idea of franchising house cleaning was still very much in its infancy. And so I felt like I could be number three. If these guys were the dominant top two, then why couldn't I be number three? And so for the next several years, that's what I did. I just tried to learn as much about the industry as I could. I tried to save money. Got to have money to pull off a business. And so I saved as much money as I possibly could over a 6-year time frame. And when I hit that internal financial metric, when I hit $150,000 in personal savings, then I was going to quit that lab job and start a cleaning business. And so I was in Atlanta and I finally hit that 150 number. By the way, in that 6-year time frame, you could write a book book on what I learned in those 6 years. But I quit my job, moved to Pensacola, Florida, started a cleaning business called Two Maids and a Mop. And that was sort of the first day of the rest of my life.
Great story. How long did you operate before you began to put the elements of franchising together?
So don't hang up on me when I say this, but at that time in my life, even though I'd read the E-Myth and it had served as an inspirational resource for me, in the cleaning world at the time, franchising was like a cuss word. Like it was bad. Like, oh, those bad franchise people, and I would even meet some cleaning franchisees across the country in that world. And they had some really negative things to say about their relationship with the franchisor. And so I thought, well, why would I do that? Have all these bad relationships? I'll just start opening corporate stores. And so that was my original thesis, was I was just going to build this cleaning empire with corporate stores all over the country. And we did that. We actually opened 12 corporate stores in the Southeast from the Carolinas down to Florida, and we're doing really good. But I hit sort of a point in that growth and that journey where it was very clear that I was going to have to do something different than what I was doing if I was going to be able to sustain the operations of something as large as 12 or more locations. And so that's when I returned to the idea of franchising and really just started reaching out to people that were in the industry. And the one big life-changing experience for me that took me in that direction was the IFA. I didn't know what IFA stood for, but I had heard a lot about it through just talking to other franchise brands, just again, doing my own due diligence. And they said, you got to go to the conference. So I went to the conference. It was, can remember it like it was yesterday. It was out in Vegas. And, I did all the things, I went to all the seminars and round tables and met all the people. But probably the one thing that stuck out, I had this really chance encounter with Fred DeLuca. And so Fred and I sat across the table from one another. As you can imagine, for a young wannabe entrepreneur, it was like meeting Warren Buffett at the time. It was an amazing experience that I still reflect on. But he became a mentor to me along with others in the industry. And they all just sort of banded together to help me understand why franchising is actually the best way to grow a brand and all the reasons for that. So that's how I got to this world of franchising. It didn't happen immediately. It took me several years to get there, but I'm glad I finally made it.
And for those in the audience, on the off chance there's anyone alive doesn't know who Fred DeLuca was, Fred was the founder of Subway, the late great Fred DeLuca.
Absolutely. Yeah. He had so much wisdom and he was so free with all of it. He would just talk to you. And he was very opinionated in his beliefs, but at the same time, it came from decades of real life experience. And so how could you not listen to that and learn from it?
So in a nutshell, in this first segment of our conversation, take us full circle to what happened next. Give us the milestones that walk us up from that chance encounter with Fred DeLuca to your exit from Two Men and a Mop. And on the other side of the break, we're going to come back and talk all about the current day and the way forward. So why don't you close that loop for us first, Ron?
You betcha. So once I made that discovery that franchising was my new mode of growth, we had to start unraveling that. And so we had 12 corporate stores. And so for the next 12 months, that's all we did. We didn't really focus on startup growth. We just focused on conversion of our corporate stores. So 11 of those 12 corporate locations transitioned to franchise locations. We kept the one corporate store in our backyard, which was here in Birmingham. We had relocated from Florida to Birmingham, Alabama at the time. And so we had 11 franchises and one corporate store a year after that meeting in Vegas with Fred DeLuca and at the IFA conference. And we took it from there. I'll tell you more about it here in a minute if you want me to, but we eventually built it to almost 100 locations before exiting in late 2021.
Yeah, let us hear what that journey was all about.
Absolutely. So believe it or not, well, maybe it's not that big of a mystery, but it wasn't hard to find people that wanted to buy those existing locations. All of the 11 transitional corporate to franchise locations were profitable, cash flow positive, turnkey in nature, had management in place. Those were as easy as they could be to sell. The startup franchise that had no revenue, no infrastructure, was all just opportunity. That was a little bit more difficult for us. And so after that first year, we only actually developed 2 startup territories, one in Tampa and the other in the DC area. And we really had to learn, look inside and say, what are we doing wrong? Why aren't we selling franchises, basically? And so you've got this industry in the back of your hand. But at the time for us, it was still very much a foreign topic for us. We didn't really understand what franchise development meant. And so we just thought if you had something really cool and you shouted loud enough, people would find you and then you would take off, become the next Subway. But it took us a year to really understand what the franchise development process needed to be, like even have a discovery process, what a discovery day was, what type of candidates or even qualified, not financially, but just personality qualified. And then, of course, most importantly, just how do you find these people? And so we tapped into the world of consultants, and we had a strong reception as soon as we did that, even though we only were able to develop 2 territories in that first year of real franchise operations. We actually had 24 deals that very next year, and all because of just learning on the job how to find franchise candidates, how to educate them on our model, and then, of course, most importantly, how to help them grow their business. And so when they started growing their business very quickly, we had almost immediate success for a lot of these early franchises. And then we already had the historical success of those transitional franchises that were corporate stores. All of that sort of came together and became this perfect storm. And we just went gangbusters right after that. So it had taken me, I didn't say this earlier, but it had taken me more than, I think, 12 years, almost somewhere around 11, 12 years to get to a point where we actually started franchising the brand. And so it was a 12-year journey to get to 12 locations. In the next 3 years, we went from 12 locations to over 50 locations in just that short amount of time. And that's all because of the power and beauty of franchise.
I love what I'm hearing. And so you made it almost to 100 before you exited. How did the exit occur? Who came knocking on the door, and how many people did you talk to before you made a decision to let it go?
Well, once we hit, I don't know what the exact number was, but once we hit a roughly 50 or so locations, people were knocking on my door. We were getting the emails and the phone calls. The PE groups were wanting to come to Birmingham and take me to lunch and have a drinks and, all those things. And I'm always open. So I was always listening, but I was never really serious about it because, one, I was the founder. So I had a much different version in my head of what it was actually valued at compared to what the marketplace thought it was probably valued at the time. And so I just didn't really see myself ever selling the business. And so I listened, but turned every opportunity away every single time. No matter if it happened every day, I would turn it away. And so that was just sort of who I became. Two Maids and a Mop became part of my identity. It was almost part of my DNA. And selling, again, just wasn't on the table until I had this weird moment. And so if you kind of go back to that day in Atlanta where I was stuck on the expressway, I had that feeling again and I didn't know why. So I sort of had this sort of pit in my stomach, and sitting here at the time, downtown Birmingham in a high-rise building with a huge office. I'm living the life that I had dreamed of. At the time, we had become one of the top 3 residential cleaning brands, franchise brands in the country, which was what my dream was to begin with. So it all was coming true. It was the American dream literally coming true. And here I was thinking something didn't feel right. And I felt the same way that I felt when I was 25 years old. And when I looked around and self-reflected, I had built corporate America. And, I'm an entrepreneur, and I don't necessarily love bureaucracy, and I don't love all those meetings, and I don't love people taking care of themselves to protect their job, and I don't like the corporate drama. And I want to use my day, every second, every minute of a day, to make that business better, to make it stronger, to make it healthier. And I wasn't doing that. I was having a lot of bureaucratic meetings. And so I had 2 choices. I felt I wanted to fix that, of course. And so I either had to just put my head down and be a good leader and start changing the culture and remove corporate America from that world, or I could exit and maybe start over, because I was already having some inner dreams, entrepreneurial dreams, of maybe attacking another home service industry. And so I went home, talked to my wife, and talked to the family, and made a decision after a trip randomly to Key West, Florida, when I encountered a big, huge super yacht there that later turned out to be owned by the founder of Home Franchise Concepts, in fact, or the parent company of Home Franchise Concepts. And so I reached out to one of those investment groups that had been calling me every day for years. And I said, hey, I think this company might be a really cool fit. The founder seems cool. Let's see what happens. They said, let's back up. That's not how this works. You don't just go knock on somebody's door. You got to put a whole bunch of stuff together. You got to pitch it. You got to talk to the world, not just just to one person. So I said, okay, talk to the world. And so that process took several months to just put it all together when I finally made that decision to exit. But ironically, even though we did talk to the world, we ended up in the exact same place I wanted to be in the first place. I really had fallen in love with the culture and the history of Home Franchise Concepts, or again, of their parent company, which is JM Family. And the story just really resonated with me. I saw a lot of myself in their founder, even though he was just a few $1 billion wealthier than me. And so I was very proud whenever at the end of the day, into that process, we were able to sell the business to Home Franchise Concepts, because again, as the founder, I wanted my little baby to be in the best hands possible. I didn't want to just sell it to the highest bidder, in fact, because I wanted to make sure that next owner treated it with the same love and care as I had done for the previous 20 years.
I love the story. It continues to get better and better. So when did the exit occur? What was the date?
Yeah, so that occurred in September of 2021. So in this case, 3 years ago or so. And it happened fairly quickly, not necessarily overnight, but it didn't necessarily take months and months either. They were really easy to work with. And so the transition happened and I sold the business, and all of a sudden I'm in my home basement and I'm staring at the wall going, okay, now what? Well, again, if you kind of think back to my earlier story, I had already had some sort of itch to attack another home service industry, but I didn't know what it was going to be. I didn't want to just be another copycat of another industry and just follow along and be a cog in that industry. I wanted to be a dominant player. I wanted the next round two to be a little bit different than round one, because I didn't want to reach a point where I lived corporate America life again. I wanted that journey in round two, the next business, to be all about entrepreneurial drive and hustle and just making every second count of your day. And so I didn't really, again, know what that was going to be until one fateful day right here in Birmingham. My mother-in-law, of all people, hired a local moving company, and it was a terrible experience for her. I mean, all the things that could go wrong went wrong. The trucks were late. The work was shoddy. It was lots of damages, rude, unprofessional behavior. And then at the end of the day, the original estimate, the final price was 3 times what she thought it was going to be. So it was a horrible experience. And then it got even worse whenever she complained that the owner laughed at her as she was crying in his office. And so it was like not even a 1-star experience. It was 0 stars. And so she told me about that experience and said, Ron, what do I do? And so my wife immediately said, you should write a really nasty review, which she ended up doing, by the way. But I said, why don't we start a business to do something about what's wrong with this industry? Because this can't just be happening to you. And so that's what I ended up eventually doing. We started a local moving company with the same drive and ambition I had at Two Maids to just scale using the franchise model across the country. But instead of just scaling, instead of just growing, we wanted to actually create a whole new category inside this space. We call it happy moving. We call ourselves, in fact, the world's first happy moving company. And the premise behind that is not just to be kind of cute, but it's really to keep us grounded so that as we grow and scale across the country, we all have a purpose. We have a mission. There's a journey that we're a part of, so that we all, me, along with everyone that's a part of this network and home office, will always feel like our day means something. We won't ever feel like we're in corporate America ever again, because to create a category in an industry that has looked the same for 100 years is not for the faint of heart. It's not going to happen overnight. And so I still feel to this day that the work in front of us will always be so big that we'll never ever lose interest in it. It'll always be a fun, purposeful journey. So we started a moving company in Birmingham, Alabama, just a few weeks, in fact, after I sold Two Maids and a Mob. And it was a weird transition, because I went from that top floor penthouse office space to the back office of a 1,000 square foot office space that provided moving services here in Birmingham, Alabama. And so it was a culture shock, but a welcomed one at the same time, because it was good to be back on the ground, really good to just sort of feel that way again.
We're talking today with Ron Holt, founder of Two Men and a Mop, and founder and CEO of the current day franchise opportunity that he's presenting, which is Pink Zebra Moving. We're going to take a quick break here, Ron, and when we come back, you've laid a great foundation of how you've gotten to where you are today. And when we come back from the break, let's talk about the birth of Pink Zebra, why it inherited such a unique name, and what you see going forward. This is Franchise Today. I'm Stan Friedman. We're going to be back in 2 minutes or less, so don't go away.
Franchise Today will be right back. But first, a word from our sponsors.
Franchise Today is brought to you by FRM Solutions, offering the only CRM tool built exclusively for franchising that lets you have it your way. Whether you're a single brand needing professional tools across departments or a portfolio of brands needing franchise-specific CRM across the enterprise. Either way, FRM satisfies the needs of many with the power of one. That's right, one single instance of FRM is all it takes across departments or across brands. So if you've had it with inflexible, one-size-fits-all CRM, end your frustration today. FRM offers robust dashboarding, tailored reporting, and with open APIs, FRM pushes, pulls, and integrates with other databases, providing you with a single source of truth. Don't just take my word for it. Visit them at frmsolutions.com and order up a demo today. And we are back with Ron Holt, founder and CEO of Pink Zebra Moving. Ron, you've accomplished something that's kind of unique in that Fred DeLuca himself, who inspired you into the franchise world, tried many times in his life to create second or third successful brands. And I just find a strange irony that the guy who inspired you to learn about franchising has been eclipsed by somebody that he tutored or mentored, because you're now well into your second brand and are successfully franchising Pink Zebra. So before we get into the story of Pink Zebra, let's get into the brand. Where did that name come from?
So it's a bit of a homage to one of my favorite books, one of my favorite marketing books called The Purple Cow. I don't know if anyone's read that book. It's by a guy named Seth Godin, and Seth wrote that book more than 20 years ago. I incorporated a lot of its principles into my original business, Two Maids and a Mop, but I was never really able to memorialize it with any type of branding or terminology, right? It was just the principles were inside the business model, and we followed that. Basically, it's a simple book to understand. If you were to drive past a pasture of cows, more than likely they all look the same. They're white, they're black, they're spotted, whatever. You move past it, drive past it, and you never remember that moment again the rest of your life. But if one of those cows was purple, you would remember that moment in your life forever. 20 years from now, when somebody says, hey, remember that purple cow? You would see yourself in that car driving past that pasture. And so very simple principle, but the book basically says that most business owners think that hard work or capital even is the reason that their business is successful in terms of consumer demand. But the reality is most businesses that grow because consumers recognize a difference in their offering. And so I wanted Pink Zebra Moving to be an actual different type of force within the moving industry. I literally want it to create a new category, again, called Happy Moving. And so I wanted to pay homage to that book since it had played such a huge part of my professional life for so many years. And so Purple Cow was the book. Pink Zebra Moving was born really because of that connection. It didn't hurt that pink was the opposite of male testosterone. So we wanted this industry, in moving industry, is well documented that it's a bunch of young guys with big muscles that do the work. So we said, well, let's just paint a different picture. Let's be the opposite and call it pink. So Pink Zebra became the name, and we started going from there. I mean, we've got crazy stuff that happens within this business model. Obviously, we have a mascot because every crazy business has to have one of those nowadays. So we've got a cool mascot called Zeke. But the most important thing that we do is we literally make the moving experience fun for our customers. We felt like the experience for most moving customers is the opposite of fun. We think in some cases is painful, like it was for my mother-in-law. So we said, let's do something super ambitious, maybe even unheard of, and try to actually build an experience that's fun for our customers. And so you may be wondering, how the heck can you do that? If you'll allow me a minute or two, I'll explain what some things we offer that make the moving experience fun.
Go for it.
All right. So let's start with the beginning. So when you hire a moving company, typically the moving experience starts for most moving companies on move day, of course. Why wouldn't it? 2 trucks, 1 truck, whatever number of trucks shows up with some strong dudes and they get to work. We think that the moving experience starts well before move day gets here. And so there is this onboarding process that most moving companies totally neglect and just book the job, wait a week or two, show up with some trucks and do the work. Well, during that 1 or 2 week time frame, the whole lot of anxiety builds, in our opinion, with a consumer. Like, what's going to happen? Are they going to even show up? Who did I call again? I haven't heard from them in 2 weeks. all of these wrong questions are happening in a consumer's mind. And so we said, let's just make that experience better. Let's communicate. In fact, let's over communicate. Let's send fun messages. Let's send practical messages. Let's tell them what the trucks look like, what the names of the guys are. Let's make some jokes along the way. Let's reduce that anxiety basically so that we can eventually build an actual relationship with our customer. So that's one small thing. That by itself doesn't necessarily make it fun. Probably the first thing that makes this moving experience fun is what happens the day before the move, the night before the move, in fact. So we actually feed every one of our, what we call full service customers. Full service is what you think of. Like, I'm moving out of my house, I'm moving across town or across state to another house, and I want you to unload everything there. That's a full service move. So for every one of those full service moves, we provide a free meal the night before. And it's something totally unexpected. We don't necessarily talk about it out loud. We surprise our customers with it. Every now and then a customer knows about it because they've heard about our service from someone else. But most of the time it's a complete surprise, which is really fun. And so we call them the night before and we say, hey, we're going to be there tomorrow. We can't wait to move you. But oh, by the way, tonight, don't worry about cooking. Don't worry about cleaning the dishes. That's on us. What would you like to eat? And so we provide the food for them. It shows up and it starts off that move day relationship in the most perfect way it can possibly start because everybody's happy. Everybody's comfortable. They feel safe. There's no worries. So that's probably what's known. That's like our trademark right now. But there's a second one that's a pretty close second to that. We leave behind a surprise box. We call it a surprise box at least. And that surprise box looks like a moving box. It's got a pink ribbon around it. Our logo's all over it, of course. And we leave that behind just before the trucks depart. And so as we finish the move, we leave that box behind. Within that box is all sorts of fun goodies. So some of the stuff's very generic, just candy, chocolate, whatever, still good, but generic. The personalization is what brings it home. So if you are in Atlanta and you're Chargers fan, that's kind of unique and different. So why would a Chargers fan be living in Atlanta? Well, if we found that Charger fan living in Atlanta and we learn as much as we can about these customers, then we would use that to our advantage. Inside that box would be all sorts of Chargers apparel or gear or novelties. And so when they open that box and they see the M&Ms and Charger gear, then hopefully it resonates. And again, all we're trying to do is, I say make movement fun, but really what we're trying to do is build a relationship with our customers. And so that's probably trademark number 2 is that surprise box, because again, nobody expects it as a literal surprise. One other thing we'll do, I'll mention this and then kind of move forward. We play music. That sounds very simple, right? What's the big deal? Well, hire a moving company and see what I'm talking about. In most cases, like 99% of the time, it is a weird silence that occurs in every room of every home. And it's weird. It's just awkward. And so we said, let's just take this lead of restaurant, for instance. You go to a good Italian restaurant, you're going to hear some really good Italian music in the background. So let's play some fun, happy, non-explicit music and get everybody singing, maybe even dancing. But worst case, just make the environment less awkward. And so we play music in every single room. And as simple of a little process as that sounds, you wouldn't believe the change in mindset for everyone, not just our customers, but our employees as well. And so we do a bunch of other stuff. I don't want to bog you down, but we do a lot of things with ultimately what we're trying to do is just achieve what our brand slogan is, to make moving fun.
Pretty cool.
Well, thank you.
So what year was this all, Ron, and how many franchisees have we hit since?
Absolutely. So if you recall, I sold Two Maids and a Mop in September of 2021. By December of that same year in 2021, I had opened the first corporate location of Pink Zebra Moving, again in Birmingham. And for about a year and a half, that's all we did. We just operated locally, learning the industry. All we knew was what was wrong. We didn't know what was right, so we had to learn all those things, get our feet wet, get our hands dirty, all the things you do to operate a business and learn it. And then of course, prove the model. So we proved the model and then we started franchising about a year and a half into that. And that part we felt good about. We knew all the things we had learned at Two Maids, we kind of felt like could just transition and transfer. We actually brought a lot of our old vendors along with us. A lot of the systems, it was home services, so a lot of the systems were very much the same. So we started offering the franchise opportunity in early 2023, and the reception from the marketplace was overwhelming. It still is to this day. It's only, been a little bit, but we've been fortunate to open in 17 markets across the country. Right now we have 6 other markets that are in pre-open phase. We just heard yesterday, in fact, that we've got a brand new franchisee joining the network. And so it's been a heck of a run. It's been so fun being able to tell the story to people, not just this story, but our origin story, and getting people excited, getting people not just interested in this money-making opportunity, but this actual industry disruptive opportunity. We're actually trying to do something that's disruptive. And so that's resonating with a lot of franchise candidates and getting everybody just as inspired as I am.
What about working with brokers or FSOs? How does your franchise sales process work?
Yeah, so we have chosen to work exclusively with brokers. Again, we learned that the hard way at Two Maids, what works for us at least and what doesn't work. And, working with the various broker networks has been very profitable for us. It gets us in the doors of the people who are interested in home services. Obviously, they're financially qualified. Their personalities fit this type of industry. Not everybody wants to be a part of a young franchise brand, number one, and not everybody wants to be a part of a franchise brand that's trying to create a new category within an industry. Some people actually want to follow along with what's already been done. So when we work with brokers, they're able to find those people that fit that category for us instead of us trying to find those people. It's just too hard for us to do that. We want to focus on operations and growing our franchisees' business and helping and supporting them, and we'll let somebody else do that. So we have a great friend dev team internally here that does a really good job with our discovery process. Usually when we're connected to a qualified candidate, we're able to get people excited about this pretty quickly.
And who do you profile as your primary target? Who should buy one of these franchises?
So what we have found, if you really want me to be granular here, we love folks that have been in a sales environment at some point in their life, in a successful sales environment, mainly because that personality, it's very similar to entrepreneurship, number one, but probably more importantly, again, we want people that want to be a part of a disruptive brand that is trying to do something big and large. Like we're literally trying to chase a multi-billion-dollar industry, and we're trying to be a different type of force within that. And so we've got to find someone that is driven, that's a self-starter, but at the same time wants the efficiencies of a franchise brand. And so that's a unique personality trait, because usually if you have that self-starter personality, you just go start your own business. The broker groups have been very, very helpful there, because when we tell them this story I'm telling you, they're able to go out and find those personalities. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is, since there's not a lot of those folks fit both metrics, it doesn't allow us to necessarily grow overnight, which is not the worst thing in the world. It's okay with us, but it does mean we probably won't sell 200 territories next year. So again, I don't know if we wanted to do that anyway, but since our personality type is somewhat unique, it does slow the growth a bit.
So with all the experience that you've garnered and with all of the experiences that you've lived through across two growing brands, take out the crystal ball, Ron, in the post-COVID world we live in, the political environment and economic environment that we're in. And what are your tea leaves reading? What do you see next 1, 3, even 5 years out, both for your own business and for franchising as well?
Regarding franchising, it is stronger now than, in my opinion, than it's ever been. So many people out there seem excited about a franchise opportunity. When I first started franchising, even just a few years ago, it wasn't well known. People didn't really understand it. And so there seems to be even a larger emphasis with a lot of universities now, where they're talking about that word. Younger people certainly tend to, run towards software product or service type business opportunities, but there's more and more young people that are excited about franchising than I ever saw at Two Maids. The typical age demographic at Two Maids and a Mop was well into their 40s, some usually even their 50s. We still talk to those people, of course, and we love those people. But here at Pink Zebra Movie, I don't know if it's because of a change of times, or maybe our business offering is just more relatable to a younger group. But more than half of our franchisees right now are either in their 20s or early 30s. And so while that may not be shocking to a lot of people to hear, it is for us, because that is not the experience we had at Two Maids. So I'm just really excited about it, because that younger age, one, they're financially qualified. They're able to do these things that I couldn't do when I was their age, but they also bring that youthful exuberance that just is important when you're trying to disrupt an industry like we're trying to disrupt. So that's what I see from the franchising front. In terms of what this brand's going to do and what it'll be down the road, we don't necessarily have a number. We know we have the opportunity to be in almost 300 markets across the country. But more importantly, what we want to do is literally one move at a time, change this industry so that when people consider who should I hire to move me, that it won't be about two different companies. It'll be about two different types of companies. Do you want to hire one of those old school guys or one of those new school guys, the happy movers? So we call ourselves, again, the world's first happy moving company. We're the pioneer. Nobody knows what that means right now but us. But we see a dream, a future where people, consumers, literally say the word happy moving. Are you going to hire one of those happy moving guys? So it's a huge dream. It's fun to talk about. And it's even more fun to actually pull off and make it happen and make it come to life.
Part of what you just shared with us helps me understand why you're attracting younger Gen Z franchisees. People trade in more than one currency. All of us do. But it would seem to me that those that are in their 30s and 20s are more about working in places that make a difference, trading in the currency of what else matters than they are as to how much they're going to make an hour.
Absolutely.
And I think that's probably why you're attracting such a young base of prospective franchisees converting and becoming Pink Zebra Moving franchisees. It's because it matters to them in ways that those people in their 40s or 50s never thought about. Ron, we're at a place where it's time for me to ask you, what have I not asked you before I let you go today?
I'll tell you this, I'm so honored to be able to talk to you. You are a legend in this industry. And I go back to that original IFA conference. You don't remember meeting me, but I shook your hand and I was impressed then. And I've been impressed for a long time now. So I'm just honored to be here with you.
Well, the check's in the mail and I can't thank you enough for all that kindness. I really appreciate hearing that. I love hearing it, and I thank you for it. It feels good. It warms my heart.
You bet. Well, thank you.
All right. So we can't let you go, too, without helping people find you again. So how about some contact info?
Yeah. So go on LinkedIn. You can find me all day there. And I promise you I'll communicate. I love talking to aspiring brands that want to learn how to franchise themselves. I don't require anything but maybe a 6-pack of cold beer. But I also love talking to people that are interested in Pink Zebra Moving, so that's one way to find me. If you really want to dig deeper into the Pink Zebra Moving franchise opportunity, just go to our website. It's pinkzebramovingfranchise.com, pinkzebramovingfranchise.com to learn more.
Ron, once again, it's been a real pleasure having you here. You are a disruptive guy, but you're doing everything the right way. And I'm certain your franchisees and your consumer base will all benefit from the experience. Ron Holt, founder and CEO of Pink Zebra Moving, thanks for joining us here on Franchise Today.
Thank you.
Well, that's a wrap for today, but there's plenty more ahead in this, our 15th season of Franchise Today. Next week, I'm joined by Donato's Pizza President and CEO Kevin King. Evive Brands CEO Ryan Parsons follows that up on November 6th, so stay tuned as the hits just keep coming. Remember to subscribe to Franchise Today wherever you chase pods, and I'll see you back here next week. Until then, I'm Stan Friedman wishing you the best, the very best of all things franchising, and Franchise Today is out.
Franchise Today is a production of FRM Solutions, providing best-in-class CRM tools to empower relationships with prospective and existing franchisees. Find them online at frmsolutions.com. Join Stan every Wednesday at noon Eastern for another episode of Franchise Today.
When you're part of a military family, you understand sacrifice and support. At American Public University, we honor your dedication by extending our military tuition savings to your extended family. Parents, spouses, legal partners, siblings, and dependents all qualify for APU's preferred military rate of just $250 per credit hour for undergraduate and master's level programs. American Public University. Value for the whole family. Learn more at apu.apus.edu/military.